Sarah,
Yes, Alex.
do you feel like you have good etiquette when it comes to dating?
Like, do I use the proper fork at dinner?
No, I meant more like, do you let the other person be the little spoon sometimes?
Oh, yeah, with this big spoon energy, they can be the little spoon all night long. Welcome to the season finale of Mistakes Were Made, Season 3. It's a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, non-monogamous therapist, parent, and writer. As a child, I really wanted to have good manners, but somehow I just developed anxiety instead.
I am her husband, Alex. I am really excited to talk about etiquette today because I was raised by haughty British people, so I have extremely good manners. And I brag about it all the time.
Your whole family does. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been told that your mom can eat a candy bar with a knife and fork.
Well, it's a very important life skill.
Although I still haven't seen it.
That's suspicious.
She probably just doesn't eat that much candy.
Oh, right, because she's
Also
raised right.
improper. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I am Jessica here, producing, resident, practicing monogamist, I guess. Practicing monogamist. I don't know. I'm working on that label. We'll see you in season 4 with updates.
Ooh, cliffhanger.
But I totally relate to the manners anxiety. And I always think about when I lived in France, I discovered that I was disgusting because I switched my fork to my right hand. I didn't even know that was a boorish American thing to do. And now here in America, I worry that if I don't switch my fork to my right hand, everybody's going to think I'm a snob. So
I really think that the distinction between like snob, not snob there is you keep your fork in your left hand after you're cutting with the right.
Hand,
Yeah. And then do you keep the fork turned over?
right,
And eat it face down.
That's like the European way.
Yeah.
Right?
God,
Which
it's
it
so
looks,
elegant.
It's so elegant. It's so fancy. I love it. And then I'm always just like, oh my God, I'm such a dick.
I just pick the plate up and shovel the food towards my face. It goes over great on first dates. They love it.
I feel like because you're in your garbage dad era where like most of the calories you consume is just like leftover
just
Eggo
eat
waffles
food
from
off the
3
floor,
hours
yeah.
ago. But you always eat it with a fork and knife.
I looked up for this episode as research. I looked up important etiquette, just life skills etiquette, and not eating too fast was one of them. And I was like, wow, I'm guilty of that. I ate way too fast. Yeah. But my favorite one was number 3 on the list, which seems ridiculous. When you're squeezing your lemon, you have to shield it
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
so that lemon squirts don't hit people in the eye.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Wow.
I just imagine that the lemon had a little tiny umbrella.
Oh,
It was so cute.
To protect
should.
it from the sun and the rain.
And then also it went squee when you were squeezing it.
Okay, weird.
Sorry.
This got weird already. Anyway, shifting gears. Wow. Sarah, you were in Psychology Today. You were interviewed this last week, recently. It came out, isn't it? Tell us about this.
Yes.
You're famous now
I'm famous.
Yeah.
Oh, how does it feel?
with people who read Psychology Today.
Which would be
It's a lot of people, actually.
probably.
It's where people go
but
to
who
find a
reads it?
therapist often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like a trade publication in its articles, though, because it feels like it's mostly for other therapists. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No.
I can't wait to be recognized on the street.
I think it's basically like, it's kind of like the New York Times, Washington Post, Psychology Today.
Psychology Today, exactly. It's a third tier
there,
publication.
big
Yeah.
three.
Mhm. It was an interview that has been broken into like sort of 4 parts about polyamory and non-monogamy, being a therapist for people who are polyamorous and non-monogamous, especially people who are newly exploring those identities and lifestyle. And then also like a fair amount about my own experience and philosophy around it, which was pretty cool.
Did you talk about me?
I sure did.
Did you talk about Jessica?
I sure did. Actually,
wow.
you
I'm
both
just kidding.
get
I knew you did.
mentioned.
I read it.
And, generally responding to like the trend of polyamory and non-monogamy, so many people are like exploring these ideas newly, and it's in the media more. And so just kind of like as a polyamorous person and a therapist and, a person in the world, what are thoughts and advice for people new to it?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what got us thinking about doing this episode, where as for our season finale, we can get a little more advicey and...
I wish everybody could see the advicey dance that Alice is doing.
A little shoulder move.
It's swag. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know if in the article, I think you talked a lot, and a lot of our, like, the things that we've done in the past advice-wise was sort of like talking to couples that are opening their relationships and giving advice for that. But I think today we want to talk, like, more broadly about the etiquette that new people should know out there in the dating scene, right?
Right. So much of our podcast, and I would say, like, my... practice and my own kind of interest and orientation towards polyamory, non-monogamy, and opening up is like the experience of couples moving from monogamy into non-monogamy. And that's just like been where I've been kind of like focused and interested and specialized in a lot of ways. And I've felt my interest kind of expanding more recently, probably because I have more experience with it now personally, 4 and change years. And thinking about like, what is the experience more broadly out there? What is it like to just be encountering new people who maybe are new in all kinds of configurations in their lives?
Right. Yeah. Well, and also those couples are then out there as individuals, presumably a lot of the time dating new people, and like, what is, how are they presenting and acting in relationship to people who aren't their existing partner or whatever. Yeah. And vice versa. How are they being treated? And there's like a ton of people also out there who are, not coming from that context. They're moving from being single and pursuing monogamous relationships to deciding to be non-monogamous, or getting back into dating after a long time and wanting to do that in a non-monogamous or polyamorous way, or a whole gamut.
And I think it's worth saying that maybe I feel defensive of or protective of couples in a way, because I think that we and they, couples opening up, get like they get drug a lot, like we all do, for doing it poorly and like what it's like for other people to kind of date us and stuff. But everybody is capable of doing it poorly.
Everyone's annoying.
Everyone's annoying.
Yeah.
Just all in our own special ways.
Is this a callback to our episode about solo phone?
I'm still fucking salty. I'm never gonna stop being salty about that.
Really?
I'm like good friends, or I would say with everyone involved in that episode, and still every time it comes up, I'm like, nope, still pissed.
Okay, we'll have to have him back.
Next time. A rematch.
This is the showdown. We'll continue. Yeah, so why is this an important thing to be talking about? Like, why do you think it's hard out there, I guess, in general? Why are there so many struggles and transgressions and challenges?
Well, I would say partly it's just like the obvious answer is this is a new way of having relationships, and there aren't a lot of scripts and norms and like representations of it. So people are just kind of like out there figuring it out as they go, which I think is in some ways like the incredible strength and inspiration of polyamory, but also it's the weakness and the challenge.
Right. I guess there's like a whole world of like kind of like tropes and even like specific advice and magazine articles and stuff about sort of default monogamous dating and like what you should and shouldn't do in that, and like jokes
how not
about
to be a cad, right?
Right. Yeah. And some of those will apply to any kind of dating, right? Such as, which fork to use, for instance, ever important.
The answer is always left hand, keep it turned upside down.
Yes.
That's the cutest way of doing it.
Yeah.
The cutest and most
I
elegant.
think the answer for me is if you're presented with more than one fork at a restaurant, then you just shouldn't
be at that restaurant.
Or like whatever. I was in that situation the other night, and I just ate with the same fork the whole fucking time, and I was like, "What are we doing here?
Like,
Come on,
yes.
this is Seattle in 2024.
The hell
There's
do you think
like
you
a
are?
genocide going on.
Yeah.
The air is filled with smoke. Like we're worried about which fork we're using.
Yes,
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Anyway, so
Also, well, okay, I could go on about the forks and everything you just mentioned, but I'm not going to take
really
the
hit
bait.
on something
Okay,
here.
I'm not going to take the political
don't
bait
take the-
yet.
yeah.
We'll wait until hour 3 of recording this.
We were also talking about how, like, sometimes when people are newly entering the poly dating scene, they're like in what I think you were describing as like a feeling of like renewed adolescence, and kind of having this like crazy bonanza, like just like doing a lot, and maybe, well, I don't know, like what were you thinking when you were?
Yeah, so I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. Definitely, I have noticed in myself and folks and clients that when you're moving into polyamory for the first time after monogamy, there's kind of a couple of things that happen. Like, one is there will just be like this kind of new relationship energy that you have with polyamory. You know, it's just like utopian.
Right.
So many people are just like, wow, I've finally found it. This is like, where was this my whole life? This is so perfect and amazing. And it's the answer to all of my relationship problems. And, you know, that kind of feeling. And then I also think for a lot of folks, if you're going back into dating for the first time after a long time, kind of wherever you were in your dating development, you're going to revisit. Like the last time you dated, you're going to revisit again. So, you know, maybe you like booed up with someone when you were 28, right? And then for 10 or 15 years, you all were monogamous, and now you're opening up and you're in your 40s.
Yeah.
You're going to be like tossed back to that like 28-year-old self in ways that are sometimes cute and charming, and also can be kind of chaotic and confusing, I think, for you as well as people you're partnered with or dating.
Intense. I mean, when we got together monogamously, I think I had probably had like 5 partners for a cumulative like 3 months total or something like that. So, wow. Yeah. I didn't.
You felt like that happened to you?
Kinda. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
I mean, I thought I was really smart and knew what I was doing.
Like any good 25-year-old.
Exactly. But, yeah, I didn't have very much experience. For sure. I didn't. I was a noob. For sure.
And looking back on it, what's just like an example of how you might have been acting more like a 20-something version of yourself? It's trapped in a 40-year-old's body.
Maybe that I was trapped in a 40-year-old. It was like Big, the movie with Tom Hanks. I was playing like a giant piano with my feet, stuff like that. No, I think I was. It was like the maybe the pairing, and I bet this happens to a lot of people, the pairing of like the enthusiasm of doing something that you haven't, like, you don't feel really like that realized in, because you only did it, you know, in a very kind of limited way in your youth, and then you're back to it, but with the confidence of being a fully grown, developed adult. I think the contrast between those things is the thing that caused me to act the most like weird or out of pocket or whatever.
What's an example of something you did?
That'll make me think of something.
I think of like making out in parks.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
totally
like,
did that. Yeah.
I just did so much of that. And it's funny because I was just reflecting on this the other day. There may have been like a pandemic element to it, right?
Yeah.
But I was like the first year of dating, I was like having a fair amount of sex in parks, which
Yeah.
like I haven't had sex in a park
that is juvenile. Yeah.
a couple of years now. So
I guess that makes me think of like being overly just like romantic about everything, like just being like extra about everything. Like, you know, this is just like, you know, we're gonna go to the water and go swimming and walk in a park and make out in a park, and Yeah, just like shit that you would probably.
All of that sounds actually very nice and mature.
Does it?
But except maybe the tone of voice.
Okay, well, maybe I was nice and mature. Thanks.
But you mean just like you were trying to make everything almost kind of like cinematic?
Yeah, and I thought everything did feel cinematic. I wasn't like as jaded, maybe is one way to put it. As I didn't have an age appropriate amount of jadedness.
I just on a date recently where someone was like, "You sound kind of jaded," and I was like, "What?" Yeah, I do.
I know too much.
What did you say? What were they responding
Now I'm
to?
embarrassed. I was talking about sex, and I mean, maybe this.
I want to hear how you sounded jaded about sex.
Maybe
You're like, I've done it all.
this kind of applies to what we're talking about. You know, I think for a lot of people, when you're new to polyamory and non-monogamy, there is a lot of focus on just having lots of sex and varied types of sex with many people. And that's fine, and I don't need to pathologize that at all. And in fact, like for some people, that is the expression of polyamory and non-monogamy, that that's their identity, they enjoy it, they continue to do it throughout their lives. I think for some people, it's like a specific part of a larger arc of figuring out what you might like about polyamory and where your identity is. And so I was joking a little bit about folks who are new in polyamory, and they're like, and then I had sex with this person, and then I had sex with this person, and I had sex with this person. And I was like, okay, well, that is exciting and wonderful. And also, well, the emotional dynamics of sex are infinite. Aren't we all just doing some iteration of like the same 20 things over and over again? It's not like every time is just some brand new physical discovery, right? And that's when the person called me jaded.
I think the thing with that is that there's a truism here that is that nobody wants to hear about the sex that you're having.
That's true. Nobody wants to hear
Across
about
the
sex.
board, in any
I do not.
situation,
No, I don't.
like there, I don't think this is like not
some
sex
people-
positive.
okay.
I think that unless they're implicated in it, like they want to hear about it if you're like, I was doing this and I was thinking about you or some shit like that.
Well,
but
some
other
people
than that,
have like a kink where they like to hear about people having sex.
okay, but generally speaking, it's like bragging or talking in detail about the sex that you've had to people.
Yes,
You know.
bragging about sex to people is annoying.
And it always sounds like bragging.
I don't know if that's universally true, but it is annoying.
I don't know. I don't
Is
mean
that-
to. I don't
does that
mean to
mean-
sound like. No, I don't want to sound prudish, but I do think this is a thing, and maybe this is like a thing that like I felt in the early stages as well of just being like, wow, I'm having sex with people, and I like want to tell people about it, but like people don't want to hear about the sex you're having.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jess?
It's interesting. I feel like
Jessica's
for
like, I
me,
love it.
I mean, well, it's like I can see both things. Like I do enjoy hearing sometimes about people's sexual encounters. Like, and I think, and sometimes I'm like, "Ugh, God, shut up about it. Like, so both things ring very true to me. And so I'm trying to think about what the distinction is. And I think sometimes like, when the reason they're excited about it is because it's like focused on some kind of like curiosity or discovery about themselves or the world or people or whatever. It's like exploratory and new. Like, yes, they are doing some combination of the 20 things, right? But
20?
it's like,
I can only think of 4.
I said a lower number, and then the person, we bargained. And the person said a really high number, and then we like settled on around 20.
yeah. And I mean, what counts as a thing? We could have a whole podcast episode about this.
Where we talk very vaguely about. Anyway, sorry.
But it feels very different to me when they're like, just like what their vibes are about it, that it's not this sort of like, I don't know, conquest feeling or boasting or bragging feeling, but it's this like excitement and
I
curiosity.
mean, or if it's a story about some kind of disaster.
Oh,
Well,
Then you
everybody
definitely
wants
want
to
hear
fucking
it.
hear that.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
God.
Yeah. You want to hear the bad
oh,
stories.
sorry.
not
Yes.
the good stories.
The bad.
Are we bad people?
Are we mean?
Well, I think this is all kind of complex. And I appreciate, Jessica, you identifying that it's somewhat personalized and it depends on the context. But I would say if we were like pulling it back to our theme, another thing I did a fair amount early on was try and talk to everyone about all the sex that was happening. And I think I annoyed them. So maybe it's more accurate and relevant for me to use myself as an example there.
Okay, well, this could be a good segue into the first piece of advice that we crowdsourced. There's a person who makes TikToks called New to Non-Monogamy on TikTok. And one of the things that they said when I asked them this was related. She said, ask what their partner's preferences are in hearing about other partners, whether it's okay at all, and what kind of details they want to hear or don't want to hear. So I guess this is not in reference to like just people in your life, but in reference to people that you're dating.
Yeah.
Just like establishing consent in the communication.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I tended to err on the side of never saying anything about other partners, which is kind of it's like the flip side of the same coin a little bit. I've definitely had partners, and this has come up between you and I, who will just kind of like casually surprise me with intimate information about people they're seeing or, dating, and I do not like that. Although, God, it's so tough, right? Because people feel so differently about this, and like cultivating a sense of like sort of safety and consent around it is a little bit as a trial and error thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but I think that it's not like there's a right way to do it and a wrong, like there's not too much information or not enough information by definition. It's just like how much information does this person want? And that's a good thing too. Maybe there's trial and error, but it's also a good thing you can just ask, right?
Right.
I think that's what New to Non-Monogamy is saying here. Like, you can just ask them, like, do you want to hear about this or not? I think in most of my relationships, it's been more trial and error though, like where they told me something or I told them something that they like didn't want to hear, and then another piece of that's important is like if you hear something you don't want to that makes you feel bad, like just say something about it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that's necessarily intuitive.
This person is very smart. I'm realizing I've never actually done this.
Really?
Damn it.
Well, that's why you should follow her on TikTok.
Yeah, no kidding.
You're not on TikTok. Right? So yeah, that's a good piece of advice. Do we have a little sound effect for good pieces of advice?
Oh yeah, here we go.
Only you can hear it.
I know. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
I'm sure
it's
it's
great.
Yeah.
We'll fix it in post. It's applause.
Okay, cool.
But I have a related question about this for you two, which is like, I imagine there's got to be a lot of imbalance oftentimes, like where one person might want to talk about their experiences or their other partners or whatever, and then their partner maybe doesn't want to hear about it. Like, how do you sort of, I mean, have you guys come up against that?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Not sure. What do we do?
God, okay, so there's a little bit of nuance here. I would say as a general rule, and I'm just going to say this for the sake of us talking about it a little bit, men and masc people I've dated have been less inclined to want to hear about other partners, or I sort of maybe am assuming that. I'm not sure. Something's going on there where there's like less open communication about it. And femme people and women who I've been dating, it's like a constant topic of conversation.
Yeah.
Like,
and
Interesting.
I think related to that flip side, men and masked people are more inclined to hide things.
yeah, right.
Again, this is not like across the board true, but I think there's
In my experience, that's true, yeah.
Yeah. There's some like socialization that I think points us men more towards like feeling shame about things that we're doing and things that our partners are doing as well, and like wanting to not be as exposed to that.
Yeah.
I mean, is that true? Like, or like, what's the other side of that for like women are just okay with their other partners telling them details about what they're doing?
Not necessarily,
Yeah.
no. And of course, I have like plenty of clients and examples of folks in my life where that's not the case. I think this may be kind of specialized to the people involved too.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing it in myself.
Yeah.
That I feel more comfortable. I think it makes more sense for me to take responsibility for this trend than to try and like make it a trend outside of me. I feel more comfortable talking to femmes and about my other relationships, and I feel less comfortable talking to masked people about that.
I mean, you've also identified there being a trope of, in your relationships with women, them talking about their male partners a lot, and that being hard.
Yeah, I don't love that too. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where I think that to go back to the advice of new to non-monogamy, it really is about talking about it openly and recognizing that there are going to be specific dynamics with people and you're going to feel kind of different ways about it depending on who you're with. And that this is just like an element of being new to non-monogamy is that everybody is going to, not everybody, but likely you'll be dating people who are also dating other people, right?
Yeah. And I think back to your question, Jessica, I think that I would venture to say that initially the person with the information needs to get the consent from the person who's receiving. The giver of the information needs to get the consent. And it's like in the receiver of the information has the power to say, should be the one who has the power to say, I want that information or I don't, and to consent into it. And then maybe, further down the road in a relationship, there could be a place where things are happening and you're like, I want to tell you about what's happening in my relationship because I want like your care around it. And like, I think that's like kind of a little bit different.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And
like that's still hard, but so like in our background, certainly like when we'll always ask each other, like, how much do you want to hear about this?
Can I talk about this?
Can I talk about this? We'll start talking about something and then be like, oh, wait.
Is this okay?
Is this okay? Yeah. And I think that's a good practice to follow.
I think so too. I don't know if we talked about this already on the podcast, but I have clients who use Dan Savage's green, yellow, red flag, where like you're talking and if it's like sensitive, but you want to signal to the person that it's okay, you can say green flag. If it's starting to feel a little less okay, you can say yellow flag, which might mean that you like stop and reorient towards the conversation, and a red flag is stop talking about this, which I think is just an interesting, it was really helpful for them, and it's an interesting tool in respects to this.
Yeah. And useful to just like have that sort of at the ready, because this can kind of come up at any time, and just you could just be like, oh, wait a second, I'm starting to feel yellow.
Yeah. And it's maybe it's taking accountability in yourself of that, like, I'm having this feeling, and it doesn't mean like, I'm not saying you did something wrong specifically with the thing you're describing to me, just like hearing about it right now in this moment is hard. And those are different.
Yeah, and I think there's, not to get too deep on the therapy stuff here right away, but like there is an element of undoing or recognizing enmeshment patterns in your relationships here, where I think, again, some of the cultural assumptions we have about relationships is that you're supposed to be fully disclosing everything that is happening to your life to a partner. And if you're not, you're maybe hiding something. And so I think it can be like a new practice for people to be like, oh, maybe actually there are boundaries around what I share and what I don't. Like, and that's not me hiding. That's actually me being respectful.
I appreciate that. It can be really subtle too. Like I can think of like with partners, sometimes I'm like I don't want to know the thing that they're doing, like when they're going out with somebody else, unless it's like kind of specifically relevant to me. Like, if, it's like a very fine line. Like, I think what I would want would usually be like, if I'm like, can you hang out on this day? And they can't, then maybe I would want them to be like, because I'm going out with such and such a person, or like if it's directly relevant. But if it's like Tuesday and we're not really like talking about what we're doing that evening, I don't need them to be like, I'm going on a date with this person.
Yeah.
And I guess people have different like levels of kind of communication, how constant it is, and sort of how entangled they are in each other's lives. But
this one is complicated. I'm remembering that the author of my interview asked about this. And he was like, it's so interesting to me to imagine that people would process their breakups with other people with each other and be in relationship with each other at the same time. It was like, really asked me a bunch of follow-up questions about that. To him, I feel like that was actually one of the most exotic parts of the interview for him. And and so it's just kind of, I don't know, it is interesting to think about how outside the norm it is for a lot of people's relationship experiences to be communicating this kind of intimate stuff to each other at all, but also to have boundaries around it and consenting into it. It's like a real inversion of the expectation.
Yeah. And maybe people have different desires, and they'll show up differently in different relationships in terms of how much communication and how much information they want.
Yeah. I'm going to say across the board, though, because I have had this experience enough times in my life that I do not want a single partner that I have ever to just casually mention having sex with someone else recently. Like, don't do it.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't want to. No. I don't like to think that that's something that could just like fly out of left field and hit me in the side of the head.
Interesting.
I'm like, have a big, wild, vivid imagination. And now all of a sudden I have a picture of that in my head.
Right.
And I have to navigate the picture of that in my head for however long it takes for me to like process it and move on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for all of Sarah's partners who are listening now and future, let it be known.
Don't do it.
No, I feel the same way, honestly. There's like context where you'd want that information. Sure. But okay, so let's pivot to some other advice based on dumb shit that we did.
Great.
Or have done or continue to do, where we have broken etiquette. Do you want to go first or should I?
You go first.
Me? Damn it. Okay. All right.
I feel like I've already revealed a bunch of dumb shit I've done.
For me was just like the early instinct, and this is related to what you were saying about the NRE with polyamory in general. Just the enthusiasm when you have coming in is just like kind of accumulating a lot of partners or people that I'm dating or talking to in a kind of like bonanza way. And I think this is connected to the ways that like
Pokemon polyamory.
Pokemon.
That's a quote from some great.
It's from Polyphilia. I have the clip pulled up. We could actually play it.
Okay, let's play it.
Ooh, yeah.
Pokemon polyamory is when someone collects partners like they collect Pokemon. Pokemon polyamorous take on way more partners than they can handle and are constantly chasing the next exciting thing. They don't typically have a lot of consideration for the time or feelings or energy of their existing partners in a way that is very objectifying, potentially even degrading, and in a way that places a lot of the emotional labor and emotional work on their partners.
Okay, so that is from Polyphilia.
I love it when people talk about things like this with such assurance.
Yes. I mean...
And a British accent.
And a fabulous accent.
Is that British or Australian?
I think it's Australian.
She's Australian.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say she probably has great manners, but I don't know.
It just makes me... I always feel like I sound so wishy-washy sometimes. I'm like, on one hand, it can be like this, and on the other hand, it can be like this.
That's not why you're not a TikTok creator. So... what are some of the things we heard there? Like collecting a lot of people without accountability, stuff like that.
And the idea that, again, I'm like, well, to have some empathy for the people who do that, it can just be so exciting. In a world where we've kind of been taught that you can only have one partner at a time. And I think for people, anyone, but especially, I guess I'm identifying as a queer person here, like the idea that you could express all these different parts of your sexuality at the same time is like pretty intoxicating,
Yeah.
And so I can see where people get into that pattern a little bit. And then also it doesn't feel good. And I suspect it doesn't feel good for anyone involved, including the collector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think another reason that I think this happens is the way that if you're meeting people on dating apps, that really like primes you in this direction of it's like it's really gamified in the way that the apps are kind of like designed, and you feel like you're like getting to these next levels with people. You don't ever know when you are, when you aren't. You're not in control of all of the like inputs, right? It's like, I've definitely had the experience of like wanting to meet somebody new and it just taking a really long time for me to connect with anybody on those apps, and then suddenly you connect with like 3 people or whatever. And so I think sometimes that can put you in the kind of mindset of like, I need to like maintain these things. I need to like have it be, I don't know, have it be like a stronger group of people that I'm like potentially dating.
Yeah, and I think to that point, you do learn, one of the lessons I think you learn early on is that you don't get to dial up what you want in polyamory. Like the apps might make you feel like you can, and the potential like diversity of partners might make you feel like you can, but you really can't because you have not that much control over who you meet, when you meet, and the timing and all of that involved. And also, I think sometimes there's like, I don't know, maybe this isn't the right thing to say, but there can be a lot of churn in polyamorous relationships, and this maybe gets into some of the like good citizenship that we're talking about, but like, I don't want to be like, I get dumped a fair amount, but relationships end a fair amount is what I would say. And people transition out of polyamory into monogamy, or like they're decided to do something else entirely, or this whole issue that I have where I'm always dating people who are about to move. And so I think maybe there's also a sense that you're like, you don't want to just be
left behind.
Or
the rapture could happen.
Could happen, and then you want to make sure that you've only been dating sinners.
Yeah, exactly. So, when we talked about that, I don't know, you said left behind, and it just got rapture in my brain.
But talk to me a little bit about how this was a mistake early on for you. Like, we've kind of set the stage of not being like, of being understanding about it, but what is like the lesson you learned from sort of maybe not good poly etiquette to better poly etiquette around this?
Yeah, I think, I probably presented a lot of like enthusiasm and kind of like infinite capacity to the world because I was so like sort of enthusiastic, right? And so it would just always be acting like I wouldn't like signal what I was and wasn't available for until like very far down the road of talking to a new person or even dating a new person because I wanted to like keep all the options open. And because I was just like excited about new people that could potentially show up. I mean, I think the pathology here is like a very like collecting kind of pathology that is not great.
I also feel like maybe sometimes people prefer the beginnings of relationships.
Yeah,
and so that informs some of this as well. I think that I'm a little bit of a reverse in this way, where I find the beginnings of relationships incredibly stressful. I understand that they're like exciting and new, and that there's like this kind of like bubbly, effervescent new relationship energy that people are experiencing. But the like building trust with someone, being more and more vulnerable with them, it can feel like work to me.
Yeah.
And so I think that has kind of kept me from doing this a little bit. Because I just like would not have the capacity to do that with like many people at once.
That is a really interesting contrast. Like, I really like going on first dates, even the bad ones.
I know you do.
I would just go on a first date like once a week.
Oh, I need a sound effect for the horror.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about this last night too.
Yeah, well,
he
what do you
said
think
the same
that is?
thing.
What is the difference? Is that just like my positioning as a man or something?
I think that's part of it. I mean, at least what he and I were talking about is that for him, the worst date that he's ever been on was not traumatic.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so like the depth of bad that we can get to, I think as femmes dating masked people, as women dating men, is pretty profound.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel risky in the same way necessarily. Although, to be fair, I'm queer and I date people all across the gender spectrum, and I still wouldn't want to go on a first date with people of any gender every single fucking week.
I think that there's a flip side of that too, that is like earning esteem, like because there's as a man dating women, because there's like so many kind of tropes out there and so much like bad experience that women have dating men, it feels good to be able to like show up and just be like, I'm nice and we had a nice date and I wasn't a piece of shit or whatever.
It's funny.
Like,
it's exactly what he and I were talking about last night.
Oh.
And he was like, I like just being able to show up and be a better experience. And I was like,
Yeah. I've heard a lot of lesbians say that too.
yes, thank you, Jessica.
oh, really? I love that.
I feel
Like with
there's
dating people who are new to dating women.
Yeah, yes. Like just how easy it is to date women who are used to dating men. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe there's a lot here to the collect 'em all, and some of it is cultural and gendered, and some of it is somewhat personalized. What have you learned, or like how have you changed the way you approach that?
Oh, I haven't.
I feel like that's what I keep coming back to. Is you're like, no, this is a story with no arc. I started out this way, stayed this way.
Bad, stayed bad. No, you said something when we were talking about this before that resonates about you shouldn't skip depth in the interests of breadth. And I definitely have come to appreciate that idea that like there is, while the front ends of relationships can be enticing for, you know, all of these reasons that we've stated, there, if you do that enough, then you kind of realize that it's like maybe kind of the same thing over and over again. And if you're not open to like lasting connections with people, then, you know, you are going to keep getting the same thing over and over again, no matter how great or interesting or, you know, wonderful or connected those people are. You're not really even like opening yourself up to that possibility if you're always like looking down the road to the next thing.
Yeah. And you're not taking the opportunity to like learn and be kind of changed by the relationships, which is, I think, why people like, one of the reasons why people like to have multiple relationships.
Yeah.
In theory.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice, is like be aware of the potential instinct to collect or like spread yourself really thin.
Or just to have the newest portion of a relationship, the earliest portion of a relationship kind of over and over again.
Yeah. Or to have the act of dating people like supersede the dating itself.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that exactly makes sense.
That makes
but
sense,
like,
yeah.
it can so feel like, you know, this is a thing that I'm doing, is going on dates with lots of people, and like, what then?
Right. Yeah. That in and of itself becomes the activity.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so the advice is don't sacrifice depth for breadth. And remember that like the opportunity to date multiple people is what polyamory is all about, but we're not trying to collect people.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I swear it sounds really cool.
I totally believe you.
Yeah. But do collect Pokemon. Gotta catch
This
them all.
podcast brought to you by the Pokemon Corporation.
Because Pokemon have more than 20 different sex moves.
I bet they do.
Yeah, I'm sure there's Pokemon porn.
Okay, so you were asking me, like, what's a piece of advice that I maybe have that's a little harder earned in this
I
department?
can tell you're getting nervous.
How can you tell?
You're playing with your hair.
Yeah. That is when I'm nervous. I just start playing with my hair, putting on chapstick, getting up and going to the bathroom. I'm like, I think it's time for a bathroom break. Anybody else? No, but seriously, I do have to go to the bathroom.
Cute.
Okay, so Sarah, what, before you escaped to the bathroom, we were putting you on blast about things that you have done, hard-earned poly etiquette that you have learned the hard way.
Yeah, I was trying to think about the best way of communicating this, or sort of like summarizing the idea, and I came up with seduction routine, which Now I'm just feel so embarrassed.
Which of the 20 things?
Which of the 20 things? But like by seduction routine, I don't actually mean sex necessarily, but just this like, I think early on, probably because I was anxious and not confident, I was like, okay, I've sort of like figured out the thing that seems to work to like get people to like me and to like move this thing forward. And I was sort of rote in a way. Like I didn't, there were like certain, this is like, makes me feel existentially sick to my stomach to admit this, but I feel like there were like certain stories that I would tell over and over again, or even like places I would take people, you know, because I was just like, this is what I know kind of works. And I was like too scared, honestly, to just kind of be present to what was happening and let it unfold. And I think a lot of this is about me trying to control things.
Yeah. Well, and trying to curate an experience for other people. I mean, that's what's interesting about this is like, I could see the downside maybe, but also of like not being present or not having an authentic shared experience, but also like when you're just taking somebody on the perfect date. That's great.
Yeah.
Lucky them.
I kind of thought I was doing that, but then this person I was dating was like, it's interesting to me how you just kind of curate these experiences for yourself. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Wow.
And I think they were right. I mean, I think about that a lot, that I don't know that I was paying attention to who the people were that I was dating in the beginning, as much as I was like paying very close attention to how I felt every step of the way.
Will you tell us a classic, like, date or activity that you would plan?
Okay, let me think.
Do an old one so that nobody that you're dating now will
Right. It's got to be something that's been retired. Can't be
I've been
active.
dating at least one person for quite some time.
Well, by now they'll be like, oh, yeah,
It's all right.
that worked.
Oh my God. Okay, so definitely one of the ones where I was like, and now I'm going to like show you a little bit about like me and my life in Seattle or whatever. I would take them to Loretta's down in South Park.
Oh my God.
And I had like a little walk that we would like go on, and then it would like go past the house that I lived in, like in my 20s, and like I would go into like stories about what I was doing then. And it was totally like the deepening intimacy and knowledge of my background date. It was like so fucking stupid.
I can
and
see the
embarrassing.
montage, and then there's just you and a different person going through all of these.
No, but, and also, dude,
I was like,
are
this
you
is date 3.
Are you me? I have done that date too.
Well, it's a great date. It's great. South Park is the best. Loretta's is the best. Can I help it that a lot of my 20s were spent there? No, I cannot.
It's cute.
But that's like a good example of how like that would be like something I would do at a certain point in the relationship where I was like,
Yeah.
but it's kind of performative and not super authentic. And I don't want to like be too hard on myself about it, but it's just indicative, I think, of a way I was earlier on that I've really hope I have grown out of, in the sense that like being more open to really letting relationships like either emerge or not emerge and not trying to control them so much, you know? And not trying to control people's fucking impressions of me. I mean, that's like, you know, when I came in the bedroom the other day and I was like, I think I'm a narcissist. And you're like, well, I think I'm an abuser. It's like, want to hang out? No, we can I feel like even therapists can fall victim to like the therapeutic memes and labels that will be like really popular on social media. And of course, calling people narcissist is like really popular right now. And for the most part, I just find it overused and not helpful and just a way to drag someone that hurt you.
Yeah.
And also...
It's exactly what a narcissist would say.
There was I know, right? There was like a bullet point that was like a more subtle indicator of a narcissistic tendency would be people who have such high anxiety that it's impossible for them to not be trying to control other people's impressions of them all the time. And I was like, fuck.
What?
So that's what you just described. Well, on the flip side of that, you were making me think about how I I'm not going to say accused, but I was accused of, I did say it, using dating as like an escape from my life.
Interesting, yeah.
And so I guess I just think of that because it's like the contrast to like totally curating the experience for the other person. Like, it's like, what do you want to be doing? And then you just like bring some other person along to do the things that you want to be doing. But isn't that just being a fucking person?
This is about me trying to
Right.
control how people see me.
Right.
This like that is really, you keep trying to be nice, and I want to just keep pulling us back to what was really happening there. And I think in a way that was my form of escape, where
Right.
I like couldn't fucking control how like the people closest to me saw me, and I was kind of a mess. Like,
Right. So you get to be a cleaner.
I just got to be like a cleaner, tighter version of
More
myself,
curated
more
person,
curated
yeah.
version of myself. And I think that was my escape early on.
Okay.
I really I really wanted that, but then I was frustrated by it. And I don't know, you all can survey people that I've dated here more recently. I don't think that they're getting the sense that they're getting like a really curated version of me. I've gotten a lot more wild with the people that I date, for sure.
Okay, this is good. So the advice here is to like don't over curate yourself, be yourself, and let people meet you on your own terms, and get to know you.
Right, and to understand that trying to control other people's impressions of you doesn't land you in relationships that actually feel authentic and interesting and deep. That lands you in relationships that feel like a lot of fucking work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I asked one of my partners for advice about, or the advice that she wished was out there in the world, because I definitely, speaking of talking to your partners about their other experiences, I certainly heard some like poly date horror stories from her. And at first she said the poly campsite rule, which I initially interpreted, I thought she meant the thing about leave only footprints, take only memories. I was like,
Where do you
what
leave the footprints?
Yeah, exactly. Are people walking on you in a kinky way? But that's not what she meant. I think what she actually meant was leave it better than you found it, which I think is like a Dan Savage thing. So leave the person better than you found them, which I'm not sure what to make of that, honestly, because
It's very popular in the poly world.
Is it?
I would say. I hear people say that a lot.
okay,
I hear people say it to me a lot, and then I feel vaguely threatened.
that they say they want to leave you better than they found
I'm
you.
like, first of all, why are we already talking about you leaving me?
Yeah,
Right.
Second of all, what's wrong with how I am now?
Yeah, exactly. What are you
You see
trying to
things to
fix,
improve on.
motherfucker?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. Like, I feel like I got to know that campsite rule, like, as a teen growing up reading Dan Savage in The Stranger. And so, like, at that age, it made sense that, like, I don't know, your partners were, like, teaching you how to be good in bed. And that was basically, like, what it meant. So that's how I always thought of
That's
it.
what it is.
You know?
Teach them your moves.
Teach them your
Show 'em your
moves.
ways.
You got to get from
seduction
4
routine.
Yeah.
to 20.
Yeah. You need to learn one new one every time.
Well, what did it mean to her? What did you all say about it?
The other thing, it was on text, so we didn't get super deep into it, but she I guess expanded to say, don't treat people as objects for giving you the experiences that you want. Like, I think, like, in reference to the idea that, like, you can, if you're dating a lot of people in a poly context, you can get into this, like, trap of just, like, kind of like, what do I want to have happen? Like, what do I want to experience? This person is just going to help me do that. And I guess maybe that's a thing that commonly people coming from monogamy or people in primary partnerships could tend to do, like, oh, I'm just out there having this kind of like bonanza phase, and these people are gonna, be my tools for doing that, rather than like people.
Yeah, I appreciate that one. That kind of reminds me a little bit of something we were talking about earlier, which is if you're a new person to polyamory and you're dating people who have more experience, remember that they also have feelings. Like, it's not like people who have a lot of polyamorous experience or have been non-monogamous for a long time have just like regulated themselves out of having their fucking feelings hurt.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, we are people here that are going to be hurt.
Yeah. And yes, that really resonates with me. And when I was thinking about things, the flip side of what we were talking about before, like things that I have experienced that I feel like kind of violated etiquette, or, you know, we're not good for the community vibes. It was kind of that sort of stuff that, like, no matter how small or boundaried a relationship is, it still matters to people, and you still have to treat it like it matters. Like, that's not necessarily a thing that like scales with the like frequency of seeing the person or whatever. Like, you can't just be like, oh, this is just some bullshit side thing, so I'm gonna like treat you like I don't care.
Mm-hmm. I think that this one is, I really appreciate both of Allie's contributions, and this one is really getting at me. Just like the reminder that we're all so tender.
We are all sensitive people.
Yeah, but okay, make fun.
No, I'm not. It's a great line.
And I think actually the more experience you have in polyamory, it's like the more tender you can become. Mm-hmm. It's not like the more callous.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so treating yourself and others with that kind of awareness, and with that thoughtfulness is important. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes people, it's almost like they're treating it like it's relationship acrobatics or something, you know? And not like this is just like a tangle of very tender people who are all trying to find ways to express themselves and connect.
Yeah, a tender tangle.
It's a tender tangle.
Yeah. Cute.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then when you do leave them better than you found them, I do think there's a piece of this spills into that. There's challenges around like how that's done, whether it's done or not. And this is my other kind of like beef is actually breaking up with people.
Oh God,
is really important. Yeah. Like, I think if there was one thing that I had to, one piece of advice that I wanted to give to people who are new to it, it's like, even if it feels casual, you can't just like, don't phase things out without telling the other person that you're doing that. It fucking like sucks. Like, I probably have been broken up with more times where I had to make the person break up with me because I had to be like, I don't feel like you're that into this anymore. Like, it doesn't seem like you're really available. Do you want to still be doing this? And then even like have them be like, no, yes I do. It's just blah, blah, blah. And then like I had to, you know, like really push them to be like, okay, actually, yeah, this whole other thing is happening, and I don't really like
that's
the
the worst.
for it. And I'm just like, just send me a fucking text and say that assertively, like,
you know. And people kind of, again, it's like relationship acrobatics or whatever. They think that none of these kind of still just rules of being like clear and communicative with people apply. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think polyamory means you never have to break up with someone. And that is not true. That's an unkind way of being, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's really mean.
Yeah. You never have to. So you would just be dating more and more and more people.
And like, I think people are just like de-escalating without communicating to the point of non-existence. Like, they're just like phasing things out, but like never actually have to experience the break.
Yeah. And I think that even if you don't have a really strong, if it doesn't feel to you like a really strong emotional connection, what bothers me the most about that is that there is an investment of time and energy into a relationship. Like, no matter what.
Yeah.
There's, and I almost feel like that energy investment, like, it does have to like be released. Like, there's a loss there. If you like work with somebody to develop a relationship, no matter how small or boundaried, like, you did that work, and then when it goes away, it's gonna hurt a little bit.
There's grief.
There's gonna be
There's loss.
Yeah. And like, that's okay. It's not like you're doing something, you know, it's not wrong to allow that to happen or accept that that is happening, but it is wrong to deny that it's happening.
It's like that, what was I bellowing about on the street the other day where I was like, just let me fucking struggle. Just let me fucking struggle. Just like, let something be hard. Let it be loss, you know? Like, I think sometimes people just are so pathologically afraid of those feelings that there will just be like these kind of like attenuated connections that like never allow you to just grieve or struggle or for something to hurt, you know? And I think like that is, in a way, those are the stakes that make the relationships worth it. And so if you kind of like deny the existence of the struggle or the existence of the potential loss or of the end, you're denying such an important part of what makes the relationship meaningful to begin with.
Yeah, and the closure. And we could probably do a whole episode about like how to break up with people. But
we would need to bring in a guest.
I'm
noted.
Like,
because we're not good at it.
I don't feel like I'm very good at it now.
Good at
you think
it?
so? Oh, thank
I
you
don't
for saying
know.
that. Okay, well,
Mark,
Mark, we'll save
break up with me a couple times actually.
We'll save it for that episode.
Ooh.
Because so I actually want to ask you about this. I feel like when you've broken up with other people and I've been like kind of privy to it, like I'm always tempted to lean into the idea of like leaving them better than you found them. And like if you have a bad experience with somebody or you decide that the thing needs to end because of a particular thing that is really more about them than it is about you, or it's not working for you, like how much do you tell them that? You know? Like, should you ever communicate something that is like, I mean, if it's like, I'm just not attracted to you because you, like, if it's not something they can control.
Right.
One of your legs is shorter than the other and I just can't stand it. It's obviously you don't want to tell them that, but if it's behavioral things.
I think, God, this is hard. This is hard because if it's early enough in the relationship, I don't want to have that conversation with the person. Like a little bit, I don't want to have to like do the labor around ending the relationship and trying to do it like well and thoughtfully, which I try and do. Sometimes succeed and sometimes don't. And then also potentially have like a more difficult conversation around like feedback about behavior, you know? And if I've been in the relationship longer, my hope is that I will have communicated that with the person and tried to address it.
Yes.
And if it's still not working, I'm obviously going to reference that.
That's what I was just thinking. Getting the constructive advice, it doesn't work to get it when the relationship is ending or after it's ending. After it's ended, it works a lot better to get it during. And so if you have that feedback, then give it to them when you're still
in the relationship.
Yeah. And I feel like that's why that, I just like cited something that somebody who broke up with me had told me about like being, what was it? Acting like I was being like escapist or whatever. And it's like, that's a hard thing to hear after the relationship has ended. It probably would have been hard to hear during, but at least I could have like kind of thought about it and tried to like respond to it and, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, this is so relevant to like all relationships in our lives. Like when you have a hard piece of feedback to give someone about their behavior, it, to me, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, it's like indicative of a relationship that you want to deepen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Okay. So yeah.
That one's a little bit tough. Like that, I would like definitely some feelings are coming up around that. I have wanted to have feedback from people that the relationship has ended and some time has passed and we're seeing each other again. And I have not had a satisfying experience with that. Like, I feel like people are really reluctant to do that in a way that I kind of crave.
You wanted to receive the feedback?
Yeah.
I don't think you wanted, Sarah.
you wanted a post-hoc debrief.
Exactly. One time with one person, they just were like kind of giving me nothing. And I was like, I feel like it was at a time in my life where I was both very immature and kind of prematurely old at the same time. And I imagine that might have been like kind of confusing to navigate. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I was like, Thanks.
Yeah.
Coffee's on you, motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, God, that sounds really brave to want to have a postmortem with someone about your relationship. But yeah, I'm like, I don't know.
I had
I
one
can,
recently, and sorry. Go
I
ahead.
can talk to you guys about what happened and what I learned. and
You
stuff.
say don't do it. Don't do the postmortem.
I regretted it probably because I was feeling like pretty good about how not good, but I was like okay with how the thing had ended, and then yeah,
Really wasn't.
it just made me feel worse than I had before. So it's not like a big deal, you know. I don't have like, big feelings about it. Don't worry.
But you got feelings. You're in a, you're in a tender tangle.
I'm a man, so I don't really.
Oh no.
Just to recap that last one, it was how would you recap it?
Oh, I think like a good piece of advice for poly etiquette here is break up.
Yeah,
like-
break up.
Polyamory is not a bypass of having to end relationships. So you have to take responsibility for ending relationships too when they're not working anymore.
Break up kindly and directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Can I go back to one more crowdsourced one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so back to new to non-monogamy. I really like this one. When it feels like something is going to be an ongoing thing, ask how often they would like to see you. Be really upfront about how often you can see them and for how long. Definitely discuss texting and other in-between communication preferences and your capacity too. So basically just like having a conversation about like what the parameters of the relationship that you're getting into, kind of like earlier than you might anticipate. I think this resonates for me because I think, as I was saying earlier, maybe like on the front end of learning how to do this, I would just sort of like over commit or present like there is infinite possibilities and then like, you know, kind of wait to close those doors rather than like somewhat early on being like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, how much do you want to be talking? How much do you want to be going out? What does your capacity look like? Like all of those things are things that I think we're like conditioned to work them out in a really like kind of like flirty, detente kind of way where like this
Push-pull.
person, push-pull kind of way. Like we were
Nobody
talking
wants to
about in the
ask for
last
more
episode.
and be denied.
Yeah, and I think like you can just be like, this is what is gonna, you know, this is what I'm available for. What are you available for?
And then also be prepared for that to change.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that is really good advice, that the container building happens earlier than you might think. And I think if you're new to polyamory, you may not be as familiar with that practice because I think in typical monogamous dating, it's kind of like you're not talking about the size and shape of the relationship
Yeah.
until you've already like kind of established the relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's like the sky's the limit.
And the sky
it could
is
be
the limit.
nothing, or it could be
Everything until
we
you
could
die.
be shooting off into the stars together.
So I think that's just a practice that people don't necessarily have, and it can feel kind of vulnerable and awkward really early on. And I feel like I'm just learning to do this.
Yeah.
Like, to be fair, this is a relatively like new committed practice for me too, to really early on be like, okay, well, like we want to keep scheduling dates. So let's talk about what the container of this is. So, and I think because then you establish the practice of doing that because the container is actually always shifting,
Yeah, you do need to revisit it. Often.
Right.
Yeah.
possibly continuously. Yeah.
Possibly it's all you talk about on your date.
Yeah.
Scheduling
The
fetish.
meta concept
polyamorous
of your
scheduling.
relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Or the specific schedule.
Yeah, that's great advice.
It's just making me think about how I think the sort of like in monogamous dating, there is this like problem of it feeling like it's a referendum on your like lovability, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're out there like trying to date for a like permanent long-term life partner, there's just like so much fear and anxiety there. And I think for me personally, like in my dating journey, was like getting to a point where I realized like, oh, it's not like whether or not people like me on dates is not like a referendum on whether I am worthy of love. You know, and it's like polyamory just seems so cool because you can be like, you can like visibilize that more and take out so many of the things that are tied to that, just sort of like deep.
Right.
What I
Every
don't know
detail
what
of
the word
dating can
is.
be a referendum on your
Right.
lovability. Like
Right.
whether they text back in the right time frame,
Yeah.
whether they want to schedule something again as soon as you do, whether or not you want to have sex at the same time, like all of
Right,
these
but
things.
if they've
Yeah.
said, hey, I don't really text very frequently, so you might not hear back from me for a while, or hey, I'm not really that into sex right now because XYZ, or, you know, hey, I'm only available to go out once a month or whatever, like, then you know all of those things are not referendums on your lovability.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the
Yeah.
advice here is like communicate, have consensual conversations that like everybody consents into having the conversation at that time about the parameters of your relationship, and then revisit those frequently.
Yeah. Talk about the container.
Yeah.
And like think of talking about the container as an important part of being in the relationship, and do it early and often.
I like to go to the Container store to do those.
To have a container
Or
conversation.
Bed Bath and Beyond, or Crate and Barrel, any place where there's a lot of containers around.
You're like, which one? Do you like this one? This one? The
That's
nesting
actually
one?
Alex's seduction routine.
Okay, so a last few that I just wanted to make sure that we got to. One is just kind of a little bit more procedural, I guess. I think a common poor etiquette thing that has happened to me is that new people in polyamory are not comfortable with people in their lives knowing that they're polyamorous. And so I have like commonly found myself in situations where I did not know that I was not supposed to be revealed to be a partner of theirs. And that was like pretty hurtful. Like I did not like that feeling. And I think that happens a fair amount. Like I've definitely heard about it anecdotally, and I think sometimes people just don't even think about it. They're not like fully,
Right.
there's not an integrated awareness that if they're going out into the world with someone else on a date, they're going to encounter people who know them from different contexts. And like, what are you going to say? How are you going to introduce this person? And I don't know if it's fair to make a blanket rule, but I am like, if you're polyamorous and you're out in the world and you encounter someone, or maybe it's like the same as a therapist. I'll be like, I might encounter you in the world. How do you want to navigate that with me? Maybe that's the thing, is like to talk about it with the people that you're dating, so that when that happens, it's not like people trying to figure it out on the fly.
So when that's happened
Right.
to you, they're just like, this is my friend or something? Or
Yeah, or like, don't
acknowledge that you're
introduce
standing
me.
there at all?
Like I went to somebody's birthday party and like I didn't even realize ahead of time that I wasn't supposed to be like a date until a friend was like, you should text and ask. And I did. And they were like, oh yeah, no, I don't want people to know that. And I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, and I can understand why people feel that way. Being out as polyamorous is like a challenging identity to be holding publicly, and you do like take risks with it, and it's more risky for some people than for other people, and there's like implications for your job and your family. So I don't say any of that lightly, but I do say like that is something that you should navigate with yourself and then with your partners, because it'll happen, and I think it can be pretty hairy when it does.
This must come up in monogamy too, right? When you're on the like before you're somebody's boyfriend, girlfriend, day friend, like you're gonna run into people when you're like out with them, and then you have to like navigate how to introduce them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess in those contexts, people will just be like, "This is Sarah,"
Right. And then raise their eyebrows.
right, and then the vibes just indicate that it's a date. So I don't think there's like the same sense of having to actively hide that.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Like, how did you all meet? On a dating app, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yes. I totally train wrecked this recently with somebody. I think I talked about it on the
I remember that. Yeah,
I was not prepared to run into this.
mistakes were made,
Yes.
baby.
What else you got? Anything else?
I guess
We're nearing the end of the season.
I know, and I just am like, these are like doorknob confessions. In
Oh, yeah.
As a therapist, we call them doorknob confessions. The session is over. You're like 3 minutes behind schedule. The next person is waiting in the waiting room. You have stood up so that your client will also stand up and start walking towards the door. Their hand is on the doorknob, and then they turn to you. And they're like, I guess something that we should talk about next time is I killed my mother.
Classic.
You know? Like something just so dramatic. And you're like, I'll put that in the notes.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. I mean, because we used to talk about that in journalism all the time, that as soon as you say something that like lets people feel like the interview is over, like, I just have one more question or whatever, then they're like, oh, yeah, well, there's this other thing. And you're like,
I just turned off the tape recorder.
Okay, well, this season is over.
So my doorknob confessions.
Great.
I think the other thing is to remember that the values and experiences of polyamory and non-monogamy potentially deepen all the relationships in your life. And so, like, I think a common early mistake and one I made was like dating, romance, and sexual relationships is where I'm expressing my non-monogamous polyamorous values, and then there's every other relationship that I have in the world, right? Which is something else. And so I think a piece of advice that I would have for people who are new to it is you're learning so much about boundaries and communication and vulnerability and authenticity and yourself and the varied potential of connections and the size and shape of relationships and being creative with them. Don't deny other parts of your life that same inspiration because I think there's a potential for all of your relationships to benefit from what you're learning there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. The only other thing is I will go back to, sorry. I'm like,
Hand is still on the doorknob.
one, but that okay. Our friend Julia, who I talk about on the podcast all the time, said this incredible thing to me a couple of weeks ago. And she was like, remember, sometimes the relationships that you're yearning for are the ones that you're already in. And that I think in polyamory...
Was she hitting on you?
Ooh.
She's always accusing me of hitting on her.
Oh, okay.
For the record. And I think in polyamory, again, there can be this inclination to think like, okay, this is the size and shape of this relationship, and now I kind of want to do this thing, and I'm going to go out and find the person to do that thing with. And to remember that like going deeper instead of broader is sometimes the more satisfying experience, and maybe give some of the existing relationships in your life the opportunity to grow in those directions with you. Before assuming that you need to go find new people to grow with in that way.
Yeah. I love that.
Okay, I'm done, I swear.
Okay, well...
I'm just having separation anxiety about this season. And
I know. You know what? We're going to take a very short break.
Yes.
Promise.
Probably it won't be more than a few weeks.
Okay.
But, it's good to mark the endings of things.
We have to break up with season 3.
Break up with season 3. Oh, no.
Season 3, you've been wonderful. You're a lovely person.
I've learned so much with you.
I've learned so much with you. I respect you. I think you're very attractive, and I wish you the best.
I'm so excited for what comes next for you.
And I hope that we encounter each other again.
Yeah.
I'm sure our paths will cross.
I'm sure our paths will cross again.
And you know what? I think you left me better than you started with.
I'm so glad you feel that way. I feel the same.
Well, that was
weird.
A great script for a breakup text if anybody needs one. Speech to text that and send it in person. Okay, well, thank you all listeners for joining us on this season of Mistakes Were Made. We will be back in a couple months, a month soon.
The fall.
The autumn. And in the meantime, find us on Instagram at MistakesCast and on
The Gmails.
The Gmails. The internet emails accounts at Mistakes Cast. I just don't want it to end.
I know, that's right. Your hand is lingering on the doorknob. I can feel it.
We might find us on LinkedIn, maybe. Find us on Threads, TikTok.
We are not on
where
any
you
of
might
those
find
platforms.
us. On the
I mean, we're
street,
hanging out in the backyard most
out in the
nights.
world. Yeah, find us on dating apps. Whatever. Okay. All right. I'm done. This has been great. I appreciate you. Thank you, Jessica, for this season of producing and your wise and timely contributions. Thank you, Sarah, for being my partner in life and in podcast production. Thank you, Pitufo, our cat who just climbed on Sarah's lap.
For not meowing.
For not meowing this whole time.
Wow. Good job.
And thank you, both of you. This has been my favorite season so far. Thanks for being in it with me, and thanks to all of our audience who is too. See you in the fall.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.